Good evening and welcome to Fite Sports Uncovered. Fabulous show ahead of you today. I'm your host, Mark Joubert, and we're joined, and I'd like to say in studio because I'd love this to be my studio. Today, we're actually joining him in his studio. We're here in Craig Hall, Johannesburg, Roy Jones Jr. and Jodi Solomon Boxing Gym. And the man I have the privilege of chatting to today is, I don't know, I'm looking at his CV and build up to the show and chatting to him just before this particular show. And he's fought for virtually every single imaginable title that is available at light heavyweight around the world. The man I'm talking to today, Isaac Chilemba. Isaac, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for inviting us here in your home.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. I'm glad you're here.
Isaac, you are one of those misnomer boxers, one of those guys that in your introduction, I spoke about all the titles you fought for, WBO, WBA. I mean, you fought for the Africa, the Super, the Gold, the world title. I mean, you fought for every imaginable title available at light heavy. And yet if I was to step outside on the streets of Johannesburg and ask boxing fans who Isaac Chilemba is, 90% of them probably would not know who you are.
Yeah. That's very sad with our boxing locally. In South Africa, in Africa in general. People, they only for boxing, the guys that they market themselves locally on social media and all that. So today's fans, or let's say supporters, they're all into social media and stuff. So if you're active on social media, everybody will know you. But if you're just doing your job, doing what you love, without worrying about the social media and stuff like that, no one really will know you, because the market in our country or in Africa is so little compared to when we talk about overseas, like America, Europe. It's completely different.
Well, let's get to know Isaac Chilemba a little bit more. Born in Malawi.
Born in Malawi,
You've
yes.
been here in South Africa, what now, 15 years?
So for 15 years.
15 years.
2005, yeah.
Okay. You made your professional debut back in 2005. First question, what got you into the sport of boxing, and was it something that grabbed hold of you back in Malawi?
Yeah, I always loved boxing since I was young. But back then, growing up in Malawi, I never really had access to TV, or there was no internet or anything. But I knew there was a boxing because there were a few guys that I heard about it on the radio doing boxing. Then one day when I walked into this place called Bondife Center, and I saw kids training, they were doing different type of sports. There was soccer, they were doing netball, and I walked into this hall and I saw they were doing boxing, and I was like, that's it. That's what I've been waiting for all my life. And that was the beginning of my boxing. That was 2001.
So that's how you got into the sport.
Yes.
You've had a very short amateur career.
Yes, I had about only 3 years.
Yeah, very
amateur.
short amateur career. You then turned pro 2005, 35 professional bouts later. Looking at your career, 26, 7, and 2. I mean, if I look back at that career, you started 2005, 8-fight win streak. You know, out of the barn, here we go. I mean, you must have thought, wow, what a way to get into my professional career. Then the first loss kicked in. As a young professional, let's call you that, 8-fight win streak, you must be feeling on top of the world, sort of almost superhuman. And then that first loss kicks in. Talk to me about the emotions that goes through a young man's mind, you know, going through that win streak and then suddenly that loss.
To be quite honest with you, I was very glad of that loss, because before then, I won't say I felt like I was a Superman. I was the world greatest while winning those fights at the beginning of my career. No, I won all those fights through fear, because I wasn't sure if I was good enough for the sport. Coming from Malawi, I had only 37 amateur fights. Simply because I never had really had opponents. I was a big chubby kid when I was 14, 15.
Okay.
I was 84, 85 kgs.
Okay.
So Malawians, mostly the small, I barely had opponents. There was a lot of fights that I went to step on the scale, but there was no one to pay me. And all guys that were in my weight division, they were seniors. They were above 17, so I couldn't fight them. Yeah. So when I came here, I wasn't sure, even though everybody told me I was good enough for pro, I wasn't sure. There was a lot of fear going on in me. I had my first fight, stopped the guy, second fight, third fight. I wasn't sure then. Just as I was getting my confidence, say, okay, maybe I am built for this and maybe I am good enough, and then the loss came back. And I was like, okay, I have to go back to a drawing board and decide to assess everything that I've done wrong and where I'm lacking. And thank God, the fight straight after that, I fought the same guy, and I defeated him. I got my revenge. Then I moved on. And from there on, the fear, the fear will always be there. Okay, let me not say fear. It's the nerves. The nerves will always be there. But I classify myself as better than I thought I was. I knew I was good enough to do this thing, and that was the change of my career.
And then we look at your career going on there. You carried on fighting, and every single one of these fights has always been here in South Africa. Yes. You fought right the way through to 2011. That was your last fight on South African soil. And since then, every single fight you've fought has been away from home. We opened up talking about the fact that not many people know who Isaac Chilemba is, but with the last 9 years of your career, and if we look at some of the guys you fought, would that fact also play heavily into the fact that people really don't know who Isaac Chilemba is?
I think people that don't really follow boxing, only people in boxing, those who really understand boxing very well, will look up at international boxing and look at who's the best in the world right now and what's going on in the boxing industry. But for the others, as I say, area, they just look at who is making a lot of noise on social media and stuff like that, and they'll just start following that person. So yeah, it's demotivating to a point, but on the other hand, it gives me motivation that I don't really have to worry about who is watching or who is supporting me. I just have to do me. I just have to do what I love and just keep on going further and further. And that's what I did when I started. I began working with Jodi Solomon, and she came with this idea that she told me to my face, you're not built for this, for local boxing. I'm going to take you internationally and we're going to go make it out there. And yes, she took me to America, and I've had all these opportunities ever since.
Let's talk about your formative years in terms of boxing. Your first coach, Nick Durant, he was with you for sort of the foundation period of your professional boxing career. You then moved across, what was it, the fight against, back in 2011. What was it? Yes. You moved to Jodi Solomon. The impact of different coaches, different coaching styles, how big is that for boxers? How big is that for you in terms of changing up the different approaches?
Yeah, it was a big jump for me. It was a big change for me. As I was going to work with Jodi, who at the time had only had experience when it comes to boxing in a gym, but she never had any experience working with people and try to make boxing happen out of the gym. So it was a big jump for me, but I trusted her so much that due to our conversation that we had prior to that, to a point where I made up my mind to start working with Jodi, I knew that she knew more than the person that I was working with in that time was at the time. Nick is one of the greatest trainer manager in this country, and he's done the great thing to the fighters, to boxing itself. I mean, not even in 100 years' time, I don't think there'll be anyone like Nick Durant in this country. No. But what I had with Nick at the time, and when I spoke to Jodi, I saw the future working with Jodi. And that big jump took a lot out of me to do that. It wasn't something that I just did spontaneously. I had to think about it. It took me days and weeks to think about it until I made up my mind. I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm leaving Nick. I'm going to work with Jodi because I had a vision. I knew that if I carry on working with Nick, I was going to end up here like any other great champions that he has trained in his career. And my goal was to go further and beyond.
Let's talk about that decision, because, I mean, you said you thought about it for days, for weeks. One of those key considerations, I'm sure, was the fact that Jodi's a woman. I mean, let's be honest. What would a woman know about boxing? I mean, you're a guy, you've grown up in Malawi. Malawi, you know, all of the top boxers in Malawi that you were surrounded with were all men. You come to South Africa, your Nick Durant experience is all men. Now suddenly you get the opportunity, or you're offered the opportunity to work with a woman as your manager and your trainer. I mean, talk us through what are some of the things that go through your mind, particularly back then, because having a woman manage and train you, I mean, that was unheard of. She was the first.
Yeah. Lucky for me, I never had those sexist thoughts. As long as the person, I don't care whether it's a woman, man, or whatever, because now these days we've got a lot of genders going on.
Yeah.
No matter what gender they are, as long as their mind, what they think, what they're saying, or what they're promising or doing makes sense to me, and I see a potential in it, and I see the future in it. I never even thought about that in that time. I never thought that Jodi was a woman. The only thing that was in my mind is someone who is very inexperienced, who's never done this before, is going to come in and try to take my career further. I'm going to leave someone who's been in the sport and doing this for years. That was the only thing that took me those weeks thinking about my decision. But the gender, I never, even later on, when people heard that I've moved to Jodi, so I'm now working with Jodi, when people come to ask me, but what do you think a woman is going to do? I was like, I never even thought about that. And I don't think because Jodi is a female, that means she cannot deliver what any other man would do. And to me, she might even done more than what any other man could have done, and she proved that. Over the years, she have done more than any other man in boxing in the country I've seen them done.
Well, I mean, looking at your career, you moved here to Jodi back in 2009. You're now 35 fights on your record. You know, you've picked up a couple more losses since then. We'll talk about that just now. But the decision, like you say, very much vindicated in terms of moving to Jodi. Since 2011, you have fought nowhere else. Okay, well, you fought not in this country anymore. You fought everywhere else around the world. You fought for virtually every light heavyweight title imaginable. I know you were on the way to the airport to fight in Russia when the pandemic kicked in, and you guys were told to turn around, go back home. That must have been an absolute...
That was such a low blow. I was ready for that fight. I was looking forward to it. It was such a big opportunity for me. I haven't fought at a super middleweight since 2010. And now, more than 10 years later, I was prepared to move down to super middleweight just simply because I knew the guy was fighting, is holding such... what I can say, high ranks in the world.
He was ranked third.
Yes, he was ranked third in the super middleweight. So I was prepared to lose a couple words to go down to fight him, just simply because of what the outcome. When I defeat him, where I was going to be at. And then the lockdown came and there was no flights anymore. We couldn't go anywhere. That was such a long... I mean, it is what it is.
It's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. You've just heard the disappointment of being in the car on the way to the airport to go and put on his first fight of the year, first fight of 2020 for Isaac Chilemba, only to be told, borders are locked, turn around, go home, make yourself comfortable. We're going to find out more about Isaac Chilemba's rise, his career, straight after this. Don't go away.
Get faith-inspiring testimonies for living in divine health from the Healing School magazine. It's free of charge and easy to download. Just log on to www.enterthehealingschool.org/magazine. Fill in your name and email address. Download now.
Welcome back to Fite Sports Uncovered. It's me, your host, Mark Joubert. And first half of the show, we got a little bit of a breakdown of probably one of the most ghostly figures in South African boxing. Yes, I'm talking about Isaac Chilemba, the man that has a 35 professional fight career. He's fought for virtually every single light heavyweight title that has been created, conceived, or made up around the world. His last 9 years, he has not fought a single fight in this country. And yet, like I said at the beginning of the show, not many boxing fans know of or appreciate the skill, the man that is Isaac Chilemba. And just before the break, we were finding out exactly the kind of heartbreak that went into his last fight. Well, the fight that never was, being on the way to the airport only to be told the Russian borders are closed, he must turn around and go back home. Isaac, let's go back to that moment when you got the phone call to say, listen, the borders are closed, you're not fighting, don't even get on the plane. I mean, you've just gone through a massive camp. You were going out there to make a statement, like you said before the break. You were going to go drop down a couple extra kilos, drop down a weight division. You were going to go and take on the number 3 ranked fighter in the division. Now you're told, go back home. I mean, mentally, what goes on in your mind right there and there?
Yeah, I didn't know what to do with myself at that moment in time. I was like, okay, maybe it's going to happen. We tried to see if there's any other way, if there's any type of documents we can get, we can take with us. I wouldn't mind, at that time I didn't mind even going to the fight 3 days before the fight, because this was a week before the fight that we're leaving. If I 10 days before the fight that we're leaving, and we're told, no, you can't, borders are closed. Then we heard, no, but some people they're still traveling, depending on what, if it's whatever reason why you're traveling is very important, important enough. And we tried our best to see, either it took about 2 or 3 days to a point where we came to a complete looks that the fight is not going to happen at all. Then I just have to go back home, and the lockdown level, I think that was level 5, came, and I just have to stay indoors doing nothing. All I did was watching TV, and I didn't know what to do with myself.
And what sort of impact did that have on you as a professional fighter? I mean, you make your money fighting, stepping into the ring. Yeah,
financial was, it takes a lot, because boxing, that's all I know. Boxing, that's all I do. And without that, then my finances go low. I know I do personal training on the side just to keep, but that's to keep my days going, because it would be I did it before where all I did was training. I would just train and stay at home. That's where I pick up a lot of bad habits. Mm-hmm. So to keep myself going, keep myself active, I work in between. But boxing, that's where I get most of my funding, and losing the whole year without a fight takes a lot out of me or any athlete, I could say. Unless I was earning millions of dollars, then I wouldn't matter. I wouldn't even see a difference. But in a position where I am or where I was, I could see that I wish that fight could have happened, because there was a potential earning in my career. Boxing-wise, with my age, at 33 now, getting older, it's not easy to stay out of ring for so long and come back to perform the same as you were a year ago or 2 years ago. Because as I'm getting older, the muscles slow down. I mean, it takes a lot now to get fit than I used to in my 20s. In my 20s, I just have to run a couple miles and get in the ring, do some sparring, and I'm ready for the fight. Now I have to double that work. So staying out of a ring at all, and during that lockdown for I think it was 5-6 months, we were not allowed to go to the gym at all. We wouldn't even step a foot on the road to run. Took a lot out of me. I don't know. Now we're back in the gym, trying to work out. I'm trying to get my fitness back, trying to get my timing back, but I don't know how long it will take to regain everything.
And obviously there's nothing signed and sealed yet for anything the end of 2020 or early 2021.
Unfortunately, the fight was put on hold. We're saying as soon as we're allowed to travel again, they will schedule the fight. Then as I said, in between, I don't know what happened between the fighter and his promoter. They had a four part, they let each other go. Now the fighter is signed to a new promoter, whom they gave him a fight, I think a month or 2 months ago. He fought a guy from France. He fought and they moved on. So our contract we had to fight him under the previous promoter is invalid. So now to get that fight, if we can get him again, we have to negotiate with the new promoters. Otherwise now, Jodi is just busy working on any other opportunities we can get.
I've got to ask, you are now based, well, as of 2 years ago, you are now based here at Roy Jones Jr., Joni Solomon Boxing. The last 2 years, you've had the experience of having someone like Roy Jones Jr. in your corner, someone that's always been there in the sort of build-up last couple of days before your fight to add from his 75 bouts of experience. What's that experience like for a young athlete?
Yeah, working with Roy, first just to correct it, I actually started working with Roy since 2016.
Wow.
It was years before Jodi and Roy opened the gym here. We were working, I think I worked with Roy for about 3 or 4 fights before they opened the gym. It's such an honor. Roy is my idol. Growing up from the amateurs, I looked up to Roy Jones Jr. I always wanted to be like Roy Jones Jr. I wanted to fight like Roy Jones Jr. Till today, years later, if you ask me who's the best fighter in the world, in my eyes, Roy Jones Jr. Now to meet him in person and start working with him in person and do some drills together and throw punches at each other and looking at him and said, this is growing up when I was 13, 14, I was watching this guy and all I wanted is to be able to move like he does, be able to throw a punch like he does. Now I'm actually in a gym with him, working with him with such. I don't know how I can explain the feeling. I'm not good in explaining or expressing feelings, but it was great and honor to do so.
Then I've got to ask, we're 3 weeks out. Roy Jones Jr. versus Mike Tyson. Obviously, I know where your allegiances lie, but your thoughts on this upcoming battle between the two legends, Mike Tyson and Roy Jones Jr.?
I think, first of all, I think it's going to be either a very exciting fight or could be either way completely...
Totally boring.
Totally boring. This is in my eye. Simply because the age doesn't really matter, especially Roy, because I've worked with him for a long time and I know how active Roy is. Roy, you can put him in actual a championship bout today, and he'll be okay to do so. I'm not sure about Mike, because I know for the past years he was very inactive to a point where he said boxing was just a waste of his life. He didn't want to do this anymore. I remember a couple of years ago watched a video about him talking to the guy about his birthday, all this garbage. I don't want this anymore. It's just something like that. He was completely done with boxing, and now he resurfaced and come back into boxing. So I don't know how his fitness levels or his abilities will be like. But Roy, I know he's always in shape. He's always good on that level. But when it comes to fight itself, if I have to go back and think about Mike, the Mike we knew and know from 90s, and Roy from 90s, I don't know, this would be a great fight. I think it would be better than any other heavyweight professional bouts, championship fights we've seen over the years. Maybe Fury and Wilder, the second fight, I think that was very interesting enough for me. Maybe they'll be almost at that level. Or it could be completely something that no one would be like, why did I waste my time to watch this?
Yeah. Let's talk about fighters. Let's looking at your career. I mean, you fought, Maxim Vlasov, you fought him just before you started traveling and fighting all your fights. You beat him way back then, 2009, if I remember, 2011.
Yes.
Okay. You recently fought him, you lost, unanimous decision. We look at Dimitri Bivol, you've also fought him. A couple of other big names, if I look, Tony Bellew, got to come to mind. And then the man that most recently was in the headlines against Canelo Alvarez, Sergey Kovalev. I mean, you fought against Kovalev for a number of world titles back in the day. I mean, those are monster names in the sport of boxing. But I got to ask, which has been the toughest opponent in your career to date?
Funny enough, I get this question a lot. And my answer was disturbing, but I'll tell you this. To me, I tend to classify the difference between toughest fight and biggest fight. So I'll start with the biggest fight because that's not what you asked. The biggest fight for me in my career to date, it was Kovalev. Because I fought for unification. I was the first African man I believe I was the first African man to fight for unification.
Yep.
Or the big, some of the top championships in the world. It was IBF, WBO, WBA.
Yep. WBA, WBO, IBF,
Yes,
correct.
yes. I was the first man to do so. It was the biggest fight I got into in my career. But the toughest fight for me, not because the guy was any danger, there was any danger in the guy or anything, but it was just, I didn't know what I was jumping into. It was back in the days, I think it was 2010 or 2011 when I fought Dudu Ngubu. He's from Congo, but he lives in France. And when I fought him, I had 13 fights, 12 wins, 1 loss, and he had 19 fights undefeated. Yep. And the guy was smart, he was quick, and he was a WBC international champion then. I was the challenger. Now, I watched his fights on YouTube. I see him beating up the guys in France, defending his title. I wasn't sure what I was walking into. That was the biggest fight mentally. I still remember till today walking into the ring and my hands inside those gloves shaking. I was shaking while walking to the ring.
But I mean, that was a kind of special time for you, because if I look at your record, you had Dudu Ngumbu, you had Michael Bolling, you had Tommy Oosthuizen, you had Maxim Vlasov. Those 4-5 fights, every single one of your opponents at that point in their careers was undefeated.
Yeah, I was undefeated, yes.
You then obviously took all of them on.
They used to call me the record breaker. I used to beat up undefeated fighters.
And the only one, obviously, that you weren't able to break his record then at the time was Tommy Oosthuizen, because that turned out to be a draw.
It turned out a draw. I still won the fight in my eyes.
Many people still believe that you did.
Yeah, but they said it a draw. But yeah, I was the record breaker back then.
Looking back at boxing now, we were coming out of a pandemic. So pandemic aside, your experience in the sport, 35 professional fights later, a young Malawi kid coming into South Africa, being here 15 years. Of those 15 years, you spent a vast portion of that plying your trade overseas. Quickly, how would you sum up the state of boxing right here?
Boxing is dead in this country. I mean, boxing is going down all over the world. It's not what it used to be. Like I remember in the early 2000, I'm not going to go to 90s because I wasn't there in the boxing. I was just a kid. But in 2000, where my attention was on boxing, boxing was huge. Now the boxing levels have gone down a bit. But in this country, when I came to South Africa and when I started professional boxing, I mean, Nick Durant had almost, I think, about 8 world champions in his gym. I'm talking about the names of Baloy, Bambuza, Makepula, Ndo, all of those guys. Isaac Haswaya, they were world champions in the gym. And I was training with these world champions, trying to make him a pro debut, having 2, 3, 4 fights as a professional, training with these world champions in the gym. Now these days we're barely seeing a world champion in the country anymore. Because boxing now is gone, as I was saying earlier, it's not about being a boxer anymore or being a good fighter anymore. It's about marketing yourself, and because everybody, I think the whole thing came from Mayweather, from his talks and showing money, and so everybody thinks they'll get into boxing, they'll have a fight, they'll have really talk, they'll sell themselves out, and in 2, 3 fights they'll be a millionaire, or they'll be all over the world. People will think they're the best in the world. So I think that's what took away boxing in this country. So now you get the guys that, yes, they're fighters. I don't take anything away from fighters, but they're not at the same level as boxing used to be anymore. You get the guys with 2 amateur fights, maybe 10 amateur fights, 10 professional. They'll have 1 fight and they'll talk a lot like they've just beaten Muhammad Ali, and now they just think about sponsors and this, because they just want money. They want to have one. Some of them, they want to have everything before they even have their first professional fight. That's what took boxing down, to me.
Well, there you have it. From a man who's actually been there, done that, not just in this country, around the world, fought for virtually every single light heavyweight title imaginable. Isaac Chilemba, definitely a legend in this country, definitely a Malawian legend when it comes to sportsmen. You've heard it. Guys, youngsters, get out there, ply your trade, do the sport, do it well, forget about your social media. That's all the time we've got for today. Hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more, I know I did, about Isaac Chilemba. Isaac, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for allowing us in your office.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We look forward to your next fight.
Yes, I'm also looking forward. Hopefully something will come up soon.
Absolutely, stay. Hopefully you keep us in the loop and we find out more. But for everyone else out there, until next week, defend yourselves at all times. We're out.